So the Irish language has more than one word for if. Did you know that? If we want to use the word if in Irish, we have to know it. We have to choose between ma and da for a start. There are other differences, which we'll get to later, but what's the difference between ma and da?
Ma bhím amú sa chéimhre bhín fuacht orm. Dá mein istich bhín te ach tan tearach an anis san astral here.
First of all, it depends on how real, likely or plausible your statement is. This happens in English too, but we don't change the word if, we change the verbs. Let's keep it simple by looking at some examples first in English, starting with the ones where the given condition seems factual or nearly. We tend to use the present tense for these. If she has her cat, she is content. If you watch Rosnarún, you know about Tig. If you're the birthday boy, you get to choose. If it rains, I don't go out. In Irish, for this sort of if, we use má. But let's use an Irish example now in the present habitual. Má bhíonn John an, bíonn she sásta. Má bhíonn John an, bíonn she sásta. Má is the word for if here, and we're using the present habitual, implying this is usually the case. So if John is there, usually she's happy. Here's a simple quote from the Wikipedia entry on Irish syntax. It says, the particle má introduces a conditional clause that is plausible, also called a realis condition. Má causes lenition and takes the independent form of irregular verbs. We're not talking about an unreal, an unlikely or a counterfactual situation, so we choose má. You'll notice I said má bhín with lenition. Má bhím in éireann, bím sásta. Má bhím in éireann, bím sásta. If I'm in Ireland, I am happy or content. A rule here then, cited in Learning Irish, is má, lenites or lenites, all verb forms, and that book says except tá. Elsewhere we also find in other sources that there are some further exceptions to the lenition after má. The ones to remember are that it's the verb tá in that form. If the verb is one of the forms of the irregular verb aber, that starts with a D. So for instance, if you say má dúirte, má dúirte, if it's in the past tense of fai, má fuair me. And then if the verb is regular and in the autonomous form of the past tense. So those examples given. If you use if in the past tense and the verb begins with a vowel, you use that D that you're probably already familiar with. So for instance, má dóilse, if he drank. What about when we talk about the future, if something's going to happen? Let's consider again an English example as we did before. If John is there tomorrow, she will be happy. You notice that in English, that even though we're talking about the future, we start the first part with an is. If he is there, meaning tomorrow or the next day, she will be happy. So the second part gets a will, but we don't say if John will be there. We say if John is there. Even when we're talking about tomorrow or next year, we only use will be in the second part. Or I should say the non-if part, because you can say it the other way around. But back to the future. If we travel next year, I will need a new suitcase. If we travel sounds like it's in the present, but it's referring to the future. And in Irish, the word má behaves a bit like this, essentially. To use an example sentence, again from Learning Irish. Má bhíonn Martin an, bé coit sásta. So if Martin is there, coit will be happy. The first part after má is in the present. The second part, the result, if you like, is in the future. The book Teach Yourself Irish on page 280 also tells us that má is followed by the present tense when either present or future events are being referred to. And on the next page, it uses an example to contrast how tá and bhíonn might be used after má. Má tá sé a gobar anis. if he or it is working now. Má bhíonn sé a gobait amárach, if he or it is working tomorrow. So there's your difference between má tá and má bhíonn. One more thing, at least one more thing. If it's dealing with the copula is, it becomes más, M-A-S. For example, más málat. If you like it, you can see that this is má plus is málat, making más málat. We should also note, and this one comes again from Learning Irish, on page 45, that más is pronounced with a slender S before third person pronouns, so because they're beginning with a slender vowel, I would guess, so it becomes a sh sound on the end of the word. What about the other if in the positive, dá? Dá is used when things seem less likely, or the speaker doesn't believe the if clause. Let's see how these things can change if they're more unreal or counterfactual, as they call it, where the speaker, that's us, thinks that the first part is not true or not likely. In English, we'd still use the word if, but we change what we do with the verbs. Instead of the present indicative, we use subjunctive, or used to, plus what you might think of as conditional, for example using would. Don't worry too much about the grammatical terms here. You'll know it when you hear it in English. The point is we change the verbs. We still use the word if. If you were, I would. If he did, she would. In Irish, these are the ones where you change the if and use conditionals. These are the ones where you use dá. Examples from English. If she had a cat, she would be content. You notice how that's different from if her cat is there, she's happy. Because in this case, we're not even sure she has one. We think she probably doesn't. If she had a cat, she would be. If you watched Rosnaroon, you would know about Taig. There we are speaking to someone who clearly doesn't watch it, or else they would know. These are all examples where you would use dá and the conditional in Irish. Or to underscore with a witty example cited by Paul Kroger and many others, although some people say Churchill wasn't the one who really made this riposte. Lady Astor said to Winston Churchill, "If you were my husband, I'd poison your drink." And he purportedly replied, "Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." If they were saying it in Irish, they would both have been using dá. If it's unlikely or counterfactual, or the speaker very much knows the first part isn't true, then in Irish, for this sort of if, we use dá. What do we do with dá? Dá main in Asian, vein sásta. Dá causes eclipsis in the verb that follows, and that verb will be in the conditional. A little note here, there are apparently some unusual cases where people might put it in another form, but let's just go with the conditional because that will be the most common, so we'll stick with that for now. Dá mech John anseo, vet she sásta. Dá mech John anseo, vet she sásta. If John were here, she would be happy. Clearly what's implied there is he isn't there, and that's a state that would be so. Now, also please note that lesson 10 in Learning Irish, which is looking at dialect from Connemara, gives the word dá as rá. That's a variant in that dialect. It gets trickier, of course, when you want to talk in the negative. If something is not the case. If John is not there tomorrow, I will not be happy. Here Irish works differently because there's a negative form of if. Remember I said at the beginning there are other differences as well. This is one of them. The negative form is mura, or in some dialects, mara. So either spelt M-U-R-A or M-A-R-A. But in both cases, kind of meaning if not. Online, you'll hear mona and mara. The good thing about this word is that it's the same for the negative of ma and dá, and mora or mara causes eclipses. Wikipedia Irish syntax also points out that preceding the preterite, so in the past, it becomes murar, M-U-R-A-R, causing lenition. In fact, the negative form requires so much unpacking, to use that cliche, that I plan to do a separate video on it, especially looking at those changes with the past tense. But for now, we need to know that it means if not, that it causes eclipsis in the present. If it's in the past, it's murar, and causes lenition. And also it's important to note that the negative form mara takes the dependent form of the verb that follows. So where you said, for instance, ma ta, you would say mara wil, in the same way that you say nach wil. But as I say, I'll save a lot more of that detail on the negative form of if for a separate video, which it deserves in its own right. It's quite tricky for an English speaker. If you've found today's video useful or helpful, as I've tried to figure out the differences and how they work and shared it with you from one learner to another, why not check out my other videos where I look at various aspects of the Irish learning experience.